enter the stars, and every once in a while, there is a glitch in the matrix. The elite make a mistake about their circle of lies. But with the rise of artificial intelligence, it's more and more rare that this happens. And that's why I look back in history, because this is when they were sloppier. They didn't have artificial intelligence to guide them in their deception. What you're looking at is an experiment that I did a couple days ago. And we're going to reproduce this later in the show and get more accurate proportions. But in order to do that, we have to look in Google Earth and look at much bigger proportions to get the proportions exactly right to do the experiment. So we're going to do a little experiment later in the show today. But what we are told is that there is a vast distance, this is what science tells us, between the moon and the sun, compared to the tiny, tiny distance between the earth and the moon. And if you imagine that the camera on my phone here is the earth, and the little pinwheel candy is the moon, and the watermelon is the sun, you'll very quickly realize that the watermelon does not change size at all as you move between the earth and the moon. So imagine you're an astronaut moving between the earth and the moon. Now remember, this is what they're telling us. Don't think that I believe in all this, but we got to use their science to discredit them, right? So this is what they're saying, that they're moving back and forth between the earth and the moon, which is a tiny distance compared to the moon and the sun. Now, what you're going to notice is that the size of the moon changes dramatically as you approach it from Earth. So imagine you're on the Apollo lunar lander and you're leaving Earth and going to the moon, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger in your field of view. But the watermelon, which is the sun, is not changing size at all. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at all of this. The impossible eclipse of the Apollo 12 moon mission. Now, the reason why NASA rarely speaks about eclipses on other planets is because there really are none, at least none like here on Earth, where the moon completely and almost exactly covers the sun. So this is a very, very rare and special event. It's called the Canon of 400. Let's pause this and go into the tabs here. The Canon of 400. And thanks everybody for coming out to the show this morning. Let's look at this. This is fascinating. The Canon of 400 states that the moon is 400 times closer than the sun, and at the same exact time is also exactly 400 times smaller than the sun. So this is the science that we're told, right? Here's the size of the moon, 2,158 mile diameter. And then you look at the size of the sun, and it's exactly 400 times bigger, almost exactly. Okay. Oh, this is this is it here. All right. And then we have the distances, 94 million miles, sun to earth, and they're telling us that the distance from the moon to earth is 400 times smaller, and it's almost exact. Now, we know that this couldn't happen without a creator, if it is how they're telling us it is. The problem that we have now is people like NASA are trying to talk you out of believing in God when we have this staring us right in the face. They're trying to convince us that each of the following criteria align perfectly to create what we see in the sky, completely by chance. So remember, all these things have to line up. The size of the moon, the size of the sun, the distance from the sun to the earth, and the distance from the moon to the earth. All those things have to align perfectly to give us what we see in the skies in eclipse. Now, it's written in the Bible that the signs of the heavens show the glory of God. And I think that this must be what they were talking about. This is the proof of his creation. And anyone that wants to believe the statistical impossibility of this, the way they want to present it to us, that's a heart issue. You're denying your own creator. And that doesn't end well for most people. Now, do other planets have eclipses? They do, but not like the eclipses we have on Earth that are completely and perfectly covered. Here are the Martian eclipses that they're telling us, remember. And as you can see here, the moon, the Martian moon, or one of the moons, Phobos, does not completely cover the sun. Now, science tells us that the planets closest to the sun, they call those like the inner planets, that they have small moons, but because the planet is so close to the sun appears bigger in the sky, and so the moon never covers the sun completely. This is what they tell us, as you can see here with the Martian planet. And then they tell us that the planets further away from the sun have a larger moon in the field of view. And those are larger planets further away from the sun. And then it overpowers the sun behind it because those planets are further away from the sun. So, there are none that have a moon that exactly covers the sun. I dug into this. Spent hours researching this. Here's an article from Live Science. And they talk about what I just told you about how all of this plays out. And what they're saying is the reason why, we don't have eclipses that look like Earth's eclipses. And then you factor into the fact that we are the only planet in our solar system whose moon exactly covers the sun during an eclipse, that also just happens to be the same planet with life, which also just happens to be the only planet that is habitable with oxygen. I mean, wouldn't it just be easier to believe that the sun and the moon were the same size? That's what I believe. Now, let's get into this eclipse. This is the Apollo 12 mission. And just as they were leaving the moon's orbit to come home, this is what they're telling us, they said that they saw this eclipse. Now, there were no eclipses on Earth that day. But, okay, let's be reasonable. Okay, you're in a different trajectory, you're at a different vantage point. Let's say you did see an eclipse that nobody else on Earth saw. And I looked this up because there were no eclipses in 1969 on this date. The moon mission Apollo 12 started on November 14th, 1969. And when they actually saw the eclipse, they're saying it was on the 21st. I'm going to show you that real quick for documentation's sake. And they were 1 day in to a 3-day trip returning to Earth. Intrepid's ascent stage was dropped after Conrad and Bean rejoined Gordon in orbit. It impacted the moon on November 20th. The seismometers the astronomers had left on the lunar surface registered the vibrations for an hour. Okay, whatever. The crew stayed an extra day in lunar orbit taking photographs, so that would put them on the 21st of November for a total surface stay of 31 and a half hours. On the return flight to Earth after leaving lunar orbit, the crew witnessed a solar eclipse. This is what they're telling us. This was on the 21st. Now, the total, this is just documentation that there were no eclipses in 1969 in the month of November from our vantage point on Earth. So, Houston, there's a problem. Because only 1 day in the 3-day return trip home, this is how long it takes for them to get home, it would have been impossible for the astronaut to see the eclipse that they claimed that they did. Why? Because the moon would have been way larger than the sun from their perspective from where they were at in the sky. Takes 3 days to get from the moon to Earth, we were told. They were on day 1 of their journey, putting them still very, very close to the moon. So I showed you the demonstration from my camera, but the perspectives are a little off, the ratios. So we got to go to the macro, right? We've got to do an exact recreation of what we are told they experience, even though I know that the effects are the same in other perspectives. They're just more profound in certain examples, but we'll do it their way, right? We'll recreate the experiment. Let's take a look here. Now, I went into Google Earth and I pulled up the building that replaced the 2 buildings that came down, right? And I did the math on this, and basically I chose the 1 mile ratio or perspective, okay? Because that's just a nice clean number. So I picked 1 mile, and 1 mile means that this object here, this pillar, this post, becomes the moon. The building in the background that you see here becomes the sun. And if you're standing 15 feet away from this pillar, you're on Earth. Okay? These are real perspectives. The same exact perspectives that we are told exist in what they're telling us happened. Now, as you can see, the pillar here does not exactly match the size, but it was the closest object that I could find. Okay? But imagine that you walk back from this pillar, 20 feet. 15 feet is the official proper perspective, 15 feet to 1 mile. But if you were to walk back another 20 feet, let's say, which wouldn't really matter, the size of this post would match the size of the tower behind it. Why? Because you're standing much closer to this pillar here. You're standing much closer to it. So the size of the pillar is going to change dramatically as you move towards it and away from it. Whereas the tower in the background will not change size at all from your perspective, right? Because this is so much further away. So now you're starting to understand the problem with an eclipse that they said happened a day out away from the moon coming home. It didn't happen. It would have been way too large in their field of view. It would have overpowered the background image, which would have been the sun. There was no eclipse. Now, I'll review this again because the concept is a little bit complicated, but if you just think of things in terms of real perspectives, okay, then you begin to understand. So, the foreground object, which is the pillar, increases in size exponentially as you approach it, increasing in size dramatically compared to the object behind it, which is the building. With every foot closer you get or move away from it, it is the thing that is in your field of view that is getting larger or smaller. Now, I don't know what else to say about this. This is crazy because it's the truth. Now, you can try this experiment, use the proper perspectives. This is the Hudson River here, I believe. And I measured this on Google Earth, and the building is 1 mile away from this post here, almost exactly. And then you can just do the math and fill in the rest of the numbers. Using the canon of 400. 400 times the distance and the size. Now, the size isn't so much important than the distance in 2 objects and looking at how those objects change size as you move forward and backwards from them. What's most important is the distances. Okay, that's what you're really trying to look at here. So, the moon, according to what they're telling us, would have been way too big. It would have overpowered the sun. And just what you're seeing, what they're seeing and showing you here just couldn't have happened. It just didn't happen. Now, let's go down here and look at this here. So I believe the only possible way that they saw an eclipse is if they were really close. If they were really close to Earth. And that was impossible because they were one day out. And if they were that close to Earth and did see an eclipse, the rest of Earth would have seen the same eclipse because they would have been at that vantage point. So there's something going on here. Now, I challenge any physicist out there to dispute these findings. And, they're probably going to come up with something. Oh, it's parallax. It's the atmosphere. It's, we're viewing it through the atmosphere. So that's what makes it. No, the sizes don't lie. We are told the sizes are the sizes. So there is no image distortion viewing it through the atmosphere. It is what it is. It's what we see in the sky. So, tomorrow's show, we're going to be talking about another lunar eclipse that happened 19 years ago on the 4th of July. And that matches the July 4th eclipse coming up in a few days. This is what is called a 19-year metonic cycle. It's where the moon appears at the exact same position in the sky, in the exact same phase, every 19 years. Now, it's off a little bit, but it's basically 19 years. Well, that year, 19 years ago, was 2001, when they had that 4th of July eclipse. It was like the 5th of July, actually. It might have even been the 6th of July, but very close to that date. And in that year, 2001, they had a matching solar eclipse that also followed the 19-year metonic cycle. In other words, in these 2 years, 2001 and 2020, the sun and the moon aligned in their 19-year metonic cycles. That's pretty rare. Now, the solar eclipse that they share this year, December 14th, and 2001, December 14th, there were eclipses. Now, wrap your brain around this, because this all goes back to ice and fire. A summer eclipse and a winter eclipse. Now, this is everything we've been talking about, because we just had a pair of eclipses this year, the same pair. This is definitely a novel year. Now, something weird happened during this 19-year metonic cycle on the 11th year in 2012 of the metonic cycle on December 14th. Handy Sook. So with these people, there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can call it the law of threes. Now, what else we're going to talk about tomorrow is a particular Chinese film that came out just right on the date, or very close to, the 4th of July in 2001, near this lunar eclipse. The sister eclipse of the one happening in a couple days. The movie was called The Kiss of the Dragon. It starred Jet Li, a famous Chinese martial artist. And in one of the last scenes in the film that we're going to look at tomorrow, he takes an acupuncture needle and sticks it in the neck of his enemy, which causes instant death. Here we are 19 years later, with this threat of the kiss of the dragon looming over us, the VCs, which will probably, my guess, will happen. They'll have this ready by Christmas, December 14th, probably, right around the time of the solar eclipse. Ice. So, that's tomorrow's show. Let's go into the chat if you guys have any questions. Thanks everybody for showing up this morning. This is a short show today, but I wanted to show you the evidence. Now, if anyone has any objections to what I just talked about, this eclipse that the Apollo 12 missions claims they saw, go ahead and, let us know in the comments. Just be nice, okay? That's all I ask. If you're some kind of physicist and you've got some kind of rebuttal to this, then we can have a discussion about it. And if I'm wrong, I'll pull this video down. So, all right. glitch in the matrix. They make mistakes too, you guys. You got to go back in time to find it most of the time. So, all right. You got it. Now, a couple of you guys have noticed. Some of you don't have any software to help you get rid of ads. Okay, so there are some ads on my videos, but understand that obviously you're here on the live show, you're not seeing ads, and this show will probably get unmonetized at first. It usually takes like a day for them to approve the video, so during that time you won't see any ads either. It's the people who wait to see the videos for 3 or 4 or 5 days when the video may or may not get approved for monetization. That's when you're going to see ads. And I hear a couple people complaining. They're like, there's ads every 10 minutes. Well, here's what you do. Download the Brave browser. There's a link in the description of every single video I put up. The Brave browser, you download it, you use it, and you won't see any ads. And it helps the channel. Now, some of you are interfacing directly through YouTube on an app on your phone, and the Brave browser is not going to help you there. But if that's the case, just make sure you watch the videos within the first 24 hours, and you're not going to see ads either, or very few ads. So that's my advice. But the Brave browser is the best way that we can go up against Google and take away some of their power, all this power they have to silence us and silence the truth. So what else do we have here? I believe they are the same size too, Ivy. Trumpy Girl likes the Brave browser. That's awesome. Many of you have already done that and are using it and are not having to see ads, and you're helping this channel. So I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't think, a lot of this stuff manifests spiritually. And so that's probably what's going on with what's going to happen on the 4th of July. I have learned not to worry about this stuff, but definitely something spiritually is probably going to happen. Some sign, I don't know, they might announce something or whatever, and it's all going to tie in to these eclipses. Apollo. Jason says, I'm a structural engineer, and the rockets in vacuum are just structurally impossible. They would need to be 6 feet thick. I agree 100%. How do you have propulsion with no air? No resistance. You gotta have resistance to have propulsion. That's probably why they really haven't got out of the atmosphere, because once you get out of the atmosphere, you're just floating up there, because there's nothing to push against it. It just makes no sense at all. So I agree with you 100%. People are waking up, you guys. People are waking up. Betty says, I wouldn't doubt if they started the VCs around on Paul's birthday. That's a possibility. Absolutely. Either on his Christmas birthday or on his summer solstice birthday. He's got 2 birthdays. But we already passed the summer solstice, but July 4th would be the next benchmark. Yes, ABC, we are saved by grace, not by our own works. 100%. Been hearing about the 4th of July event for over a decade. Exactly, Jody. Yeah, Pet Goat. We've been talking about it for like 8 years. It's been on the watch list, right? Because this is what they like to do. Isn't it weird how 4th of July is almost at the exact halfway point of the year? That was done on purpose, in my opinion. All right. You're right. Yes, Soul Rescue. There's nothing to push against. You gotta have resistance. That's aerodynamics 101. What's it pushing against? Itself? But itself has to push against something. It would basically just... Okay, so how do we describe this? If you're pushing against nothing, you're just going to stand still. That's what I believe. So, I want to thank everyone for coming out. Thanks, Greg, KKP, Tom, Trumpy Girl, Jessica, Lady A, Yasmin, Allie. All right. Well, I guess we're going to call it a show. I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow. Much love to each and every one of you. Have a great day. Share this video. Take care and be safe.